Hi, this is Seriously Good News. I'm Ed Sims. What will heaven be like? Looking at a passage of scripture today from the 20th chapter of Luke. It begins with the 27th verse. Some Sadducees, who say that there is no resurrection, came to him and asked him a question. Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, leaving a wife with no children, the man shall marry the widow and raise up children for his brother. Now, there were 7 brothers. The first married a woman and died childless. Then the second and the third married her. And so, in the same way, all 7 died childless. Finally, the woman also died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had married her. Jesus said to them, those who belong to this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy of a place in that age and in the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. Indeed, they cannot die any more, because they are like angels, and they are children of God, being children of the resurrection. And the fact that the dead are raised, Moses himself showed in the story about the bush, where he speaks of the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now, he is God not of the dead, but of the living, for to him all of them are alive. When I started to study the scripture this week, I looked at the story and I asked myself, why are we reading this scripture this week anyway? It starts out with a group of people who try to trip Jesus up, challenging his authority, and then this prompts Jesus to comment on the reality of the resurrection. The group was ultra conservative and was apparently wiped out in the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE. Why should we care about them if they are gone? It must have been significant, though, at least at the time, because it's included in all 3 synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So, what can it say to us today? First, let me set the stage. This story is right at the end of Jesus' ministry. If you've been following along on my messages, Seriously Good News with Edward Sims on YouTube, then you know that Jesus was headed toward Jerusalem. Now he's there. We skipped over the part about Palm Sunday entry into town. We generally read that in worship just prior to Easter in the spring. And as I'm speaking to you today, this is November. Fast forward a couple of days during Jesus' final week. So now he's preaching and teaching in the temple, probably on the rabbi teaching steps at the southern end of the Temple Mount platform. According to Luke, he had just driven the merchants out of the temple, and that really stirred things up. People started coming to challenge him. Chief priests, scribes, sometimes called lawyers, and elders. They challenged his authority, and he countered by telling them a parable about wicked tenants who were soon to be cast out, probably referring to those doing the challenging. They tried to trick him with a question about paying taxes to get him in trouble with the Romans. You'll remember what he said: give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and give to God what belongs to God. And that shut most of them up. But then a group of these ultra-conservative Jewish people approached him. They were called Sadducees. I say they were ultra-conservative because they took their Bible very seriously, and their Bible consisted of just the first 5 books of what we call the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. They believed these books to have been written by Moses, and Moses was their highest authority. They did not believe in the resurrection. This is because it is not specifically mentioned in those 5 books of Moses. That sounds really odd to us, but the belief in the resurrection was a fairly recent development in the evolution of Jewish theology. Prior to the exile, remember the exile? 586, when the Jewish elite were taken into captivity in Babylonia, the exile changed everything. Those returning from the exile came back with a belief that sometimes justice happens after this earthly life is over, in the resurrection. Before the exile, Jewish people believed that when you died, you simply went to sleep with your ancestors in that shadowy realm known as Sheol. Sadducees still believed that. Ultra conservative, opposed to change, even if it's good. These Sadducees came to Jesus with what they probably thought of as a humorous story to challenge the resurrection. It had to do with another ancient Jewish custom, which means little to us today, called levirate marriage. Levirate marriage is a type of marriage in which a man is obligated to marry his brother's widow. It actually serves some beneficial purposes in a male dominated society. For example, it ensured that the widow remained financially supported and part of the family structure. It kept the children, if there were any, within the late father's family, safeguarding their identity and their inheritance rights. It allowed the deceased man to have an heir through the new union, carrying on his name and his legacy. And it promoted solidarity within the clan or tribe by keeping wealth and property within the family unit. So the Sadducees told their stories to cast ridicule on the idea of the resurrection. They said, suppose there were 7 brothers, and the first married a woman and died childless, and then the second and the third married her, and so in the same way, all 7 died childless. And finally, the woman died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? Cue the laughter in the background, because she had to belong to someone. I used to feel sorry for these hapless brothers, married to this woman who must have been very hard on her husbands. If I had been brother number 7, I would have been like, I'm not sure marrying her is a very good idea. But who I really feel sorry for is the woman, passed from man to man like so much livestock. She must have felt extremely vulnerable. Maybe she just couldn't have children. That would have been an extremely humiliating situation in a culture that valued women primarily for their childbearing capacity. So the bottom line is, not so funny of a story after all. And Jesus is not laughing. He had little patience with the Sadducees posing this question. He told them in so many words that they didn't understand anything about the resurrection, which, by the way, was implicit in their own narrow collection of scripture. He referred to the story about Moses, after all, their top authority, and the burning bush in Exodus, which speaks of the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And he declared that God is God not of the dead, but of the living, for to him all of them were alive, that is, in the resurrection. Assuming Jesus' claims about resurrection, as well as the claims about Jesus' resurrection, are true, which we affirm not only in our historic creeds like the Apostles' Creed, but in our very practice and commemoration of Easter and the empty tomb, what difference does it all make? Because the bottom line is this: we will need a new language and new imagination to grasp the meaning of resurrection. When we think about resurrection, and indeed about heaven itself, our minds are filled with questions. Recently in Sunday school and in our Bible study class, the question was raised, what will heaven be like? Will we still be ourselves, with our memories and our personalities? Will we see our loved ones, those that we have loved and lost, those who have loved and nurtured us in this life? After all, reunion is a part of the anticipated joy and healing of earthly grief that we long for in heaven. One person asked, we'll be able to recognize one another in heaven? My best friend died in her 20s, and now I'm much older. Will she be able to recognize me? What will I look like? Some others spoke up. Oh, you'll be young and strong. In other words, not as old and decrepit as you are now. we say that we trust in the resurrection of the body. How will the glorified bodies that we have in heaven be like and different from our earthly bodies? What about people who died as infants or as children? Will they still be babies or little kids in heaven? Or will they have adult bodies? What about people who died before birth? Someone else said, oh no, everyone in heaven will look just like Jesus, because John wrote, we shall be just like him. Around the table, brows furrowed as people imagined a heaven populated by millions of Jesus clones. Does that mean I'll have a long beard and long white robes? Someone else commented, you mean I'll have to sing all day long, every day for eternity? I like singing, but that could get old. In the Talking Heads song, Heaven, it says, heaven is a place where nothing ever happens. Will heaven be boring? Will heaven be the same for everyone? People who have had near-death experiences, who have come back saying that they've been to heaven, usually report a heaven that fits with their own religious and symbolic understanding. Is my heaven going to be the same as your heaven? Will there even be time? Or will it exist outside of time? If it is outside of time, does exist even have any meaning? Will it be a specific place? Or will it be outside of space as well as outside of time? We know that much description of heaven as a place is metaphorical. For example, streets of gold means that the typical filth of a first century street will be replaced with the most precious element you can imagine. That gold, among the things that we value here in this earthly plane, will have no value at all. Instead, it's something to be cast out onto the pavement as something that we would tread upon. Will we somehow become angels? Called to be messengers of the divine? Will I get wings and a harp and a cloud to sit on like an angel? Or are those divine beings of a different species and substance from humanity? Will my pets be with me in heaven? Because I can't imagine being without them and the love they gave me in this life. Will there be plants, trees, and flowers, and lakes, and rivers, all the beautiful things that we have not fully appreciated here in creation? What about people I didn't get along with, or who mistreated me in this life? Will I have to be nice to them just because they got into heaven? I remember a story one preacher told me about a woman who was distraught because she suffered through an abusive marriage and a painful divorce. And then her ex-husband had apparently remarried, repented, and accepted Christ and laid claim to salvation. And she was devastated. The preacher tried to console her by saying, maybe in heaven you'll get a mansion and he'll just get a little shack. Thinking about heaven makes us do some silly mental gymnastics. All of this goes to show how impossible it is for us to figure out heaven when we think of it in earthly terms. What will it mean to be in the presence of God? To see God face to face? I don't know the answers to these questions. It's a lot to think about. As Dr. excuse me, as Dr. Karen Joins told us in our Bible study group, I don't know because I haven't been there. Hopefully yet. Reverend Kendra Moen, writing for workingpreacher.org, said, in his rebuke to the Sadducees, Jesus demonstrates how it is, in fact, ludicrous to try to understand the resurrection in terms of this life. He asserts that the rules we put in place to navigate this world are not important or even relevant in the next one because it is so fundamentally different from what we normally experience. She used this example. She said, "My kids and I have talked several times about what life was like before media and entertainment were available on demand. It's challenging for them to imagine must-see TV, having to be in front of a machine at a certain time in a certain place in order to experience a particular piece of content. In addition to the logistics, it's hard to convey the kind of urgency that accompanied certain media events, the kind of scarcity mindset or FOMO, fear of missing out, often associated with premieres, finales, or very special episodes, not easily imagined now that they're irrelevant. Think of the final episode of MASH, or of seeing Apollo 11 touch down on the moon on July 16, 1969. Reverend Moan continued, "The feelings around missing those cultural milestones were strong, even about something as trivial as television shows. In this Bible text, which is literally about life and death, Jesus tries to address the challenge of the Sadducees and also to expand the conversation beyond the constraints of the present to a future not yet imagined. We cannot imagine it. And yet we hope and trust that it will be good, better than anything that we can imagine." I want to leave you with one more detail. When you have a text that is reported in multiple Gospels, it's often helpful to look for any differences. They may offer a key insight into what the writer is trying to convey by putting their individual spin on the story. In Luke, the passage is almost word for word from Mark. I say almost because there were a couple of small additions. Mark says, "When people rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven." Luke adds not just people, but those considered worthy of a place in that age and in the resurrection. And he continues, "Indeed, they cannot die anymore because they're like angels and are children of God, being children of the resurrection." Did you hear that? Not just like angels, but freed from fear and death. Children of God, children of the resurrection. Can we really imagine this? What it is like to live without the threat of death? It's the threat of death that drives so much in life, including the realities that signal that death is close by: suffering, lack, fear, not having or being enough. What would it be like to live without these things? To be freed from fear is to be free indeed. Moan concludes, Jesus is calling us to imagine what it is like to live without the fear of death so that we can approach our lives differently. If all of this is true, if through Jesus we are all children of the resurrection, then how does that free us? How do we spend our time, our money, our energy? Jesus invites us to live and love others with that kind of freedom. What will heaven be like? I don't know. I haven't been there yet. But I know that it will be good. So good that it will blow my mind. And I know that the resurrection as a reality, with that resurrection, we can become free to love others as Jesus has loved us. And that will be a little bit of heaven on earth. See you next time.